And we're back once more.
The pain just keeps on going.
Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Well, this section is boring in a slog. I can go the wrong way. On insane mode, this section here is painful because when you get the satellite cannon, you have to hit each rover like 4 or 5 times.
You have a decent load of
Before
experience.
they die. Not really worth it if you ask me. On insane mode, there's better ways to do it.
True.
I see them.
But let's get to the last couple of things I'd like to point out with some of these, well, this interview here. See? Okay, if he had more development time, what would he like to add into the game?
What?
He mentions that if we had been given more time on this project from the beginning, we would have switched platforms from the PSP to a home console. I would have then liked to have created a shooting-based survival RPG game, where the player is placed in an even more desperate situation, blah blah blah. Basically, he says that he would like to have gone the route where Parasite Eve wanted to, when it was like a war survival, right?
That I can agree with.
Yeah,
But by this point, we just hate him on principle.
Gameplay-wise, for a PSP game, this is still pretty damn good.
Like I said, by this point, I think we just all hate him on principle now.
Yeah, well, I just hate the direction of purpose, principle, yeah. I'm not even a fan of the Parasite Eve series, but the story still hurts me. And again, you can also definitely see that they were lacking on time because notice how we will never see another cutscene or be given story in between chapters anymore. You've already seen that in episode 3, but from here on out, no more cutscenes until bosses, after bosses, and before you start a mission.
So, chapter breaks and all that.
Yeah. So you can definitely feel it that they're like they made it to this episode and they're like, crap, we're out of time. We need to just quickly put together what we need to put together, and because they're such a small team, they could only do so much so fast.
Yeah. I think it's pretty obvious that, you know, just with the break between
the jump of
I think
months.
Yeah, the 2-month time skip, I think you can easily point to that as the point where the development is starting to fall apart.
Yeah, definitely.
Because
but again, it really sounded like they barely given a budget, they barely had a team, and they barely had a time frame because it was supposed to be a mobile game, phone game to start with.
Yeah.
Then they switched over to the PSP model, and for a PSP model, they would have needed more time to do it properly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I remember hearing that some of the earliest reports of the mobile phone game.
No. He says it in an interview that it was supposed to be a mobile
No,
phone
I mean,
game, but then they switched to PSP.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying
because
that,
they were too ambitious with their project.
Yeah.
But the problem is they still only had a set amount of time and a set amount of funds and a set team size for a mobile phone game. So.
No, I'm just saying that I'd heard reports that the game, the mobile version of the game was supposed to be, you know, kind of Gauntlet inspired, so like a top-down shooter kind of thing. No idea if that's true or not, but
no idea.
Yeah, it was basically kind of like
I have
this,
not heard
only
of that.
much stripped down.
Okay, and here's the biggest threat it comes with, and I call it a threat because it sounded like a threat to me. They asked, what would you like to do with the next game? As I mentioned earlier, if given an opportunity to create another game within this franchise, I would like to create what I call a cinematic shooter RPG. Okay. He keeps saying that over and over again. On a home console of the highest quality possible. This game is studded with onyx and has spikes of leather or something. Yeah, that's what I think when I hear that. Anyway, we've successfully revamped the series. This title of the third birthday, so I'm certain that we can have I Am flourish in subsequent games as the fans are garnering for. No. So basically, he's pushing to make a sequel to this, if he can.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
He wants to make a sequel to his spin-off.
Yeah, it's weird because, you know, I've not really spoken to anyone who's familiar with the games who has said that this is a good game at all, a good addition to the franchise. I mean, if you check a lot of reviews online, they are massively, massively polarizing. They either give it, like 8, 9, 10 out of 10, or they give it 1 or 2.
Yeah. I was actually gonna get into that because I call bullshit. I really call bullshit. All these sites giving you like 8, 9s, and 10s.
I mean, from a gameplay perspective and from a presentation perspective, yeah, the gameplay is solid. The music is perfectly fine. Graphically, it's it is a very good-looking game.
It's down for a PSP game.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like early to mid-generation PS2 game, except slightly shinier.
That looks a little bit better than a PS2 game, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's graphically, gameplay-wise, musically, solid as it gets. It's if you actually happen to know anything about the story, or if you were a fan of the games, or if you
or if you just pay attention to the story.
Yeah, that's when it all starts falling apart. Which, in fairness, isn't exactly what most professional reviewers would be looking at.
No. But if you look at like the Metacritic thing where people put in there like their vote on what grade they give it, and then they add it all together through science, and
yeah, I've actually got it here. Official professional reviews give it 70 out of 100. The majority of them have been positive or mixed. There's only 4 negative reviews up on Metacritic. User scores, on the other hand, average score of 5.4. And most of the reviews have been
the
positive.
site I saw.
That's just going by what people put up on Metacritic.
Yeah, on a couple sites that I've seen, it was something like altogether the game had a 9.5. I can't remember what site it was. I can't find it yet. But it was a 9.5. That's what the. So basically, everybody had been slamming the 9 and 10 button. A few 100,000 people slammed 9 and 10s. I find that hard to believe because the fan backlash was great. Even people who were not fans of the Parasite Eve series had a huge backlash of what the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I even had a look at the reviews on GameFAQs because I know that's, basically the equivalent of going to the Deep South to ask for opinions. It's the redneck town of gaming culture.
Yeah.
But even there were quite a few. They averaged between about 6 to 8 or 9. The reviews, there was only a couple which dipped below 5. So the reviews were quite high. Which is really weird.
But but you can never trust these sites if you look at a review number because they're paid.
Yeah. I mean,
no doubt about that.
I used to work for a independent gaming site where I do reviews and that, and even I would, half of them, I would basically say, look, if this sounds remotely good to you, go buy it, give it a shot, because personally, I only ever use reviews for information, never opinions. And if anything in the review sounds interesting, I'm gonna give a game I'm gonna check it out, I'm gonna give it a chance.
Yeah. And notice how many shots these rovers can take. It's ridiculous. A good tactic is see if you can get a soldier caught in like the stun thing, and then switch over to the guy with the satellite cannon. At least buy you some time to shoot a few times. But it seems like they always go for that guy.
Yeah.
Every chance they can.
The one thing I've noticed with these videos is that every kind of fight like this, it's difficult normally, but they turn it into a literal endurance run. Not in terms of, how long the character can last, but how long the player's willing to put up with this bullshit.
Yeah. that's insane mode for you. They beef him up so tough that...
Yeah, after a while,
Well, there's areas where it is actually really damn hard, but, you know, an area like this, which is basically just a big gauntlet of enemies, and you get constant respawns of soldiers, then it's just an endurance thing, not player.
It's stuff like this that, you know, this is the kind of reason why I never usually play harder difficulty settings on games.
Well, I don't know. I like playing Demon Souls. You know, New Game Plus times what, 8, 9 before I can't win anymore.
Yeah.
Get any progress.
Demon Souls would be an exception because you know going into that you're going to get bent over.
Your ass is supposed to be kicked.
Yeah, this game's going to bend you over and it's going in dry. Whereas with this, you know.
This.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some hard areas.
Yeah.
But
it's like
this is an easy.
The thing which annoys me with a lot of games is that on the harder difficulty settings, the enemies don't fight smarter; they just hit harder and take less damage. That's not difficulty for me.
That's how you do it. But
yeah, it just annoys me.
Like the previous sections with the snatchers and the train, those are actually legitimately pretty hard sections, right?
Yeah.
And because of the bean bags and all that previously to that. So those are some hard sections, even harder on harder difficulties.
Yeah.
Trivialized by the fact that you can actually just run by through half of it anyways, but...
I mean, those enemies in those sections are difficult enough on normal level on any hard difficulty setting.
So they have some hard sections, and it's made harder by scaling and stuff, but, you know, again, if the respawn rate of normal soldiers had been lower and the respawn rate of the guy with the satellite cannon, hell, even two guys with satellite cannons, so you always have one guy to use, then this section wouldn't have been so bad. It would probably been a little bit harder because if you do lose too many guys, it's over. So you have to be conservative of the guys down here, dodge properly, avoid getting paralyzed. But
yeah, I noticed
right now it's kind of just, yeah, I got a guy paralyysed. I don't know if he's gonna die. A couple seconds, a new guy's gonna spawn anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed on playing on normal that the respawn for the satellite cannon guys was it took longer than I would have preferred.
It is abysmally slow. But then again, maybe that's because you're sitting and waiting for this one guy.
Yeah. Again, it just seems like another example of something that if they hadn't been so rushed, they probably would have taken time to deal with.
Yeah. Though I can't say the same for the story.
Yeah, well, they
could have probably told the story better, you know, with less skips and give it more sense, so the story wouldn't have been as bad. But I think the characterizations would have been the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's once you get to midway point and after the time skip, it seems like the story itself just completely falls apart because there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much that you're left to figure out for yourself, which ordinarily I don't have a problem with. But when you're given absolutely no hints whatsoever as to what would have occurred, and you have to basically make it up out of whole cloth.
Actually, a lot of the information is in the CGI files, the emails that you get, but to get more emails you have to play in the harder difficulties, and yeah.
And even then, you still have to work out a lot yourself.
Oh yeah. You have to know what's going on in Parasite Eve 1 and 2 and so forth, and have to really dig or have a good imagination. I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, at this point the story just starts to completely unravel, and some of the plot twists later on are just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's more due to the fact, again, that the development team mentioned that it had a very short period of time to make a game and all that. I would have liked to see how the game would have been if they had been able to have more time to do things.
Yeah, if they'd been able to realize their proper intentions.
Actually, maybe the game story would not have been all bad and redeemable in some sense of way if they had time to do it in. But then again, the characterization would still have been. Maybe they would have changed it if they had more. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the only character who comes out of this looking remotely good is Kyle Madigan.
Yeah, definitely. But he, like I said, he's fueled by badass.
Yeah, and
And
he's
plus now he's voiced by a badass person.
yeah, he's voiced
so,
by
yeah.
Jensen Ackles, so you know, pretty much you kind of have to like him on principle.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone else.
I feel sorry for Maida and Aya.
Yeah, my
Characters,
My-
how they just completely destroyed them.
yeah, Maeda is in particular because Aya suffers from severe character derailment. Maeda is practically character assassination.
She at least has a few excuses.
Yeah,
That we will get into when we finish the game.
yeah, that is the one thing. You can kind of forgive some of it once you actually know what the hell's
But
going on.
Maida, on the other hand, there's no excuse.
Like I said, it's it's gone from character derailment to borderline character assassination.
Yeah, and you know when you said that you had this theory that it was really the player that was supposed to be Maida, right? No, I think it's the director.
You could take that way as well.
I take it as it's the director who put himself into like self-inserted fan fiction. So, and plus, Maida's a Japanese guy. And seriously, it really sounds like he was trying to create his ideal woman with because he keeps mentioning this in like tons of reviews, how he's like trying to make Aya like sensitive and realistic, and he's trying to make her have like weaknesses and all that sort of stuff, and he's like, it really sounds like he's going on and on about how he's trying to create his ideal woman.
So in other words, he wants to make her docile and weak / subservient, but also capable of taking on legions of eldritch horror single-handed. That sounds a little bit schizophrenic to me. I don't know about anyone else.
You don't say.
That sounds like a borderline personality disorder.
But as you can see, no deaths, and this is the end of the video. So we will see you in the easy mode run,
Bye bye.
or I will.
Well, I won't.
So there's a real Basilisco that lives in the river?
I'm only saying I heard stories from people who said they saw it. But I know lots of places to find it in Nicaragua. Do you want to go have a look?
I don't have time for sightseeing.
You don't like lizards?
It's not that. I just think snakes taste better.
Who said anything about taste?
How about you? You like them?
Not that way. They do look kind of like dinosaurs, though. You don't think that's cool?
No, they're both reptiles, yeah. But there's a big difference size-wise.
I'll bet there are still big ones around somewhere. They say mammals multiplied and ate up their eggs. But they can't all be gone. They've gotta exist somewhere out there.
Dinosaur eggs, huh?
And animals are always evolving, right? Maybe they evolved so much, they don't even look like dinosaurs anymore.
Then you can't really call them dinosaurs, can you?
I guess not. Yeah, you're right. Dinosaurs have gotta be big.